When you think of a BMW naked bike, and maybe even have a look around on social media, most of the time the bike you will see is this one, the S1000R. But did you know that for just 100 euros more you can get this here, the R1300R? Well, not exactly this one, because this particular bike has accessories worth 6,000 euros fitted to it. But in my opinion, that equipment is almost mandatory, especially in everyday use. The boxer naked bikes from BMW have a long tradition. It started with the 1150, then came the 1200, then the 1250, and now we have arrived at the 1300. And perhaps not too surprisingly, in my opinion, this is the best boxer naked bike BMW has ever built. Although I have to admit, I was probably influenced by social media and also simply by BMW itself, because for me, when I thought of a BMW naked bike, of course I thought of the S1000R. The R1300R and also its predecessors, the 1250 and the 1200, were always a little bit of an old man's vehicle in my head. In terms of design, they were never quite as sporty and never quite as muscular as this new 1300. So I rather ignored them. We thought, well, that is a boring motorcycle. Heavy, sluggish, a bit ponderous. But, as you will hear today, I did this bike an injustice. I have already mentioned that this R1300R is not exactly standard, but that is mainly because of the original BMW accessories. Among other things, we have the Option 719 package, the Innovation package, the Dynamic package and the Comfort package fitted here. That means a lot of equipment. Seat heating and heated grips, the ASA Shift Assistant, which is really important, plus beautiful milled details here at the handlebar. In total, that gives us around 6,000 euros worth of accessories on the bike. So it is no longer quite the bargain, but as I already said in the intro, in everyday life I noticed that all these parts really did matter, because they made my time with the R1300R noticeably better. And why that is the case is what we will explain now, with point number 1, everyday use and commuting. Here at our outpost in Spain, the motorcycles are genuinely everyday vehicles for us. We do have a rental car, but unfortunately that is only assigned to Peppy behind the camera. So if we go shopping, if we want to go anywhere, we take the bikes. And that means I spent a lot of time using the R1300R in normal daily life. And there it surprised me quite a lot. The main point was definitely the ASA shift system. In other words, the automated shift assistant. And that system really sweetened everyday life for me. I no longer have to use a clutch. I do not even have a clutch lever on board anymore, but I can still shift manually with the foot lever. And if I want, I can also switch into a drive mode, meaning fully automated gear changes, which really makes riding easier. Especially in town, I noticed myself thinking, why not like this straight away? Why did it take so long for something like this to arrive on motorcycles? Of course, when riding a motorcycle, especially on a country road, and we will talk about that in a moment, you might want to use the clutch, you might want to feel the bike more directly, but in the city, where nothing really matters except getting from A to B as quickly and as easily as possible, I do not want to use a clutch. I want to stand at the traffic light in first gear with the clutch disengaged, and when I ride off, I simply open the throttle. And with this ASA system, that really works perfectly. You can also switch through the riding modes into eco mode. I did that in the city as well. I do not really know whether it actually made much difference, but it is always nice when the eco bar is full and you feel as though you are riding economically. So in that sense, I have to say that the ASA system was a really excellent addition in everyday use. Also, very pleasant in the city on the R1300R is the weight distribution. This is not a light motorcycle. It has a wet weight of 239 kilograms ready to ride. And then depending on equipment, there can be even more on top. But because the Boxer engine sits so low, the center of gravity is nice and low as well. That makes it surprisingly easy to guide, even with a seat height of 810 millimeters and even for me at 1.75 meters tall. Of course, here too the ASA helps again when maneuvering gently because the system takes care of engaging the clutch. That makes things easier, but the weight distribution itself has also been set up in such a way that the bike is very pleasant and easy to maneuver in daily life. Another plus point in the city is of course the presence of this R1300R. Earlier Boxer naked bikes had those cylinders sticking out down below, but towards the top they became quite narrow. With the new R1300R, BMW has done things differently. This motorcycle is properly imposing. It looks masculine. It looks as though it wants to sprint forwards. It simply has real presence in town. You are seen and people look at you again because they want to see what is coming. And of course, that has the advantage that you are noticed. You are less likely to be overlooked by a car. And that is naturally another great bonus point for the R1300R. The negative side in the city is, as already mentioned, the high weight. If you park it facing downhill and then have to push it backwards, things can get difficult. So in town, the R1300R genuinely convinced me in a surprisingly strong way despite its size. The weight distribution works, the ASA system works well, but you still need to be a bit careful, especially if you are on the shorter side like me. 239 kilograms still has to be moved around. The real surprise for me, however, came out here on the country road. The R1300R, as I mentioned at the start, was a bike I expected to be big and bulky, an old man's machine, something that surely could not be much fun. Yes, if you go touring with it, probably, but on a country road, surely it is far too much motorcycle. Well, compliments to BMW because they have executed this really well. First and foremost, there is the familiar 1300 Boxer engine, the shift cam engine, which is a real joy on the country road. In the GS, where we had already ridden it, we thought, yes, all right, the engine is quite tractor-like. It pulls the heavy GS along nicely, and it is good for traveling. But genuine excitement did not really arise in me there. Here in the R1300R, however, it really works beautifully. You can hear and feel when the shift cam joins in because the sound becomes a little bit more throaty. And then, with the ASA system, I have a perfectly functioning quick shifter on board. That means from the engine side, I can genuinely have fun on the country road. And above all, because I mentioned it at the beginning, I actually find this more enjoyable than the BMW S1000R. The reason is simple. Here I have 149 Newton meters of torque. And that torque is already available from low revs, down low and through the mid-range. When I am riding on the country road, especially on twisty roads like these here in Spain, I am not winding the engine out. I do not even get the chance because the road is not long enough. No, I am moving in the lower and middle rev range, and what I want is strong drive out of the corner. And this Boxer engine does that absolutely perfectly. Clearly better than BMW's inline 4 in this situation, although of course that is simply down to the different engine concept. So here the R1300R really surprised me and impressed me in a very positive way. What was rather negative at first, however, was the shift feel of the ASA system, because it takes some getting used to. Normally, when you ride with a quick shifter, you still have a mechanical feeling. You feel how you are changing gear. Here with the ASA system, everything feels very electronic. It feels more like pressing a light switch up or down. That means I do not really get a mechanical sensation. I only feel through the reaction of the bike that a gear change has happened. As I said, it takes some getting used to, but over a longer period of time, I noticed that it works perfectly because it is reliable. How often does it happen that even with a quick shifter, you do not quite downshift cleanly, perhaps land between gears, or when shifting up, you end up somewhere between first and second. That simply did not happen here. Every shift on the R1300R was reliable. And that is why, for me, The ASA system is also mandatory on the country road. At corner entry, I was positively surprised as well. The R1300R turns into corners well. We also have dynamic suspension on board. That means the suspension adapts depending on the riding mode. And the bike is not as large and ponderous as you might expect. Of course, you can again compare it with the S1000R. There you have the sportier riding position, and that bike simply tips into corners more crisply and more sharply. But the R1300R is not some rubber cow that wobbles through bends. No. When I lean it into a corner, it lies stable and it follows the line as if it were on rails. And if I want to, I can even make small adjustments, because it is simply very well tuned for the weight of the bike. You can tell this is not just a GS with the fairing unscrewed. No, this is genuinely a standalone naked bike. Finally, another positive point is of course the braking. I cannot really say anything especially positive or negative about it because it simply works. I have a nice pressure point at the brake. I can slow the bike down cleanly and also trail brake nicely towards the apex. Of course, it is not the super sport brake you might expect on some other bikes, but it is fine and it suits this motorcycle. There is still one final point open in this everyday use topic, and that is when things get really boring: the motorway. For the topic of motorway commuting, I had to sit down here next to this beautiful single-sided swing arm, where we can also see this wonderfully designed wheel, because of course BMW Boxer means we have shaft drive. That is naturally lower maintenance than a chain, and especially if you are traveling a lot, including on the motorway, that is a real advantage. Another real advantage is simply the overall shape of this R1300R. Especially when you look at it from the rear, you can really see how it spreads out like a mushroom. Narrow at the back and then building up properly towards the front. That is why even on this naked bike you get surprisingly good wind protection. But the absolute highlight for me was that I rode with radar cruise control for the first time, because this R1300R has it fitted as well. And it does require a certain amount of trust. In the car I use it every day and that is absolutely fine, but on a motorcycle I have to say that radar cruise control is definitely connected with a lot more trust, because if the system does not work, I could be launched straight off the bike. But I tried it, especially in slower traffic in the city or on urban motorways at around 80 or 90 kilometers per hour. It works well. It also keeps the speed when you change gear, so you can commute along in a relatively free and comfortable way. Although especially here in Spain, at a certain point you tend to say, I do not care about the traffic anymore, I'm just riding through the middle. But of course, if you want to use it, it is a great feature to have. Below 20 kilometers per hour, it switches itself off. But above that, it is certainly a cool feature if you have it fitted. So you can already tell that over the last few weeks, the BMW R 1300R has proved itself to be a genuine all-rounder. Yes, you could still mention that the operation of the display is perhaps starting to feel a little bit dated. We have known this system for a very long time now. You need to dig into it a little before you really get familiar with it. But in the end, I used the mode switch while riding. I put the heated grips and the heated seat on the shortcut button, and I did not need anything more. So I do not really want to criticize the control layout too much. Now let us come to the price and to my conclusion after my time with the R1300R. The price in Germany starts at 16,550 euros. But then it is pretty bare bones. As it stands here, it costs around 22,800 euros in Germany. That makes it significantly more expensive than the sister model I mentioned, the S1000R. But I think you get a really excellent, balanced and above all refined motorcycle. When I ride the BMW R1300R, I feel as though I have made it in life. I have a motorcycle underneath me that has presence. It feels refined. It feels properly planted on the road. It feels as though nothing could unsettle it. And that feeling on a motorcycle is something very special. That is why I no longer see it as the granddad motorcycle I mentioned at the start of the video. No, I see it as a motorcycle for people who have made it in life. People who say, I am past my social media phase. I have had the S1000R. Now I want something with grunt from lowdown. Something I can also show up with at the golf club. and that is the R1300R. So as you can see, I am enthusiastic about this naked bike. Sadly, my time with it is coming to an end soon. Of course, I would also be very interested to know what you think of the R1300R. Have you already test ridden it, or do you even have one in your garage? I would be interested in all of it. Write it down in the comments below. And then I would say do not forget to subscribe to the channel, because I also have another 150 PS naked bike with me. A slightly different manufacturer, a slightly different layout, but we will see how they compare. It is going to be exciting and you do not want to miss it, so subscribe to the channel and then we will see each other in the next video. Thanks for watching.